Hello, thank you for joining me on this short food law update. It's Wednesday the 5th of June 2024 and my name is Andy Bowles. I'm a food lawyer. What I'm going to do today is just briefly introduce a document that was published last week by the World Trade Organization. It relates to food fraud. It's titled Illicit Trade in Food and Food Fraud, and it's a publication of a series of articles by people who work within the World Trade Organization. And I thought it's helpful because if you have an interest in food fraud, you may have watched my recent webinars on the topic, for example, then I think it's useful to get a broader understanding of the topic. One of the issues, of course, with food fraud is that there isn't an international definition. In my webinars, I referred to the Food Standards Agency's definition, which is as good as any, perhaps. But what the World Trade Organization make the point in this document is that an international definition is really necessary. They review all the various definitions. They all say pretty much the same thing, and it might be helpful to know that Codex Alimentarius are currently reviewing this and are hopefully going to be publishing a codex standard on food fraud a bit later on this year. So perhaps they'll come out with a definition that countries around the world can all agree on and perhaps can all work from the same place. But what the World Trade Organization do in their document, Illicit Trade in Food and Food Fraud, and I should point out, if you're watching this on our website, www.abcfoodlaw.co.uk, you can download a copy of this just underneath this video. If you're watching this on YouTube, well, if you click in the subscription area, you should be able to go onto our website, and then again, if you look in the Food Law Update tab, there'll be a link to this particular document, or just Google it. Just Google WTO Illicit Trade in Food and Food Fraud. I'm sure you'll get the document. So basically what they do is they go through, after a discussion about the various definitions around the world, they make the point in this document that food fraud and combating food fraud is genuinely a global issue. They make the point that food trade is worth an absolute fortune. And we're talking, in terms of meat, something like international trade in meat is $168 billion worth of trade per year. So this is big stuff. They point out that the main susceptible products, and I don't think there's any real surprises here, but the most highly targeted products in food fraud internationally are going to be meat. And of course, that's sort of substitution, mislabeling, things like lower quality meats. We had our problems here 10 years ago with the horse meat scandal, for example. Then you've got fishery and fishery products, things like farm fish being sold as wild caught. You've got alcoholic beverages, of course, substitution of cheap brands for substituting for much more expensive brands. Coffee, I've done a webinar on coffee where I talk about the potential there for fraud, particularly in relation to mislabeling the type of bean, the origin, but also there is concern about substitution of coffee beans with things like corn and soybeans, or even twigs. Then things like spices, dairy products, olive oil, honey, another targeted product for fraud. Again, I've done a webinar on honey, so you might want to have a look at that to discuss fraud in a bit more detail. And then, of course, organic foods, because organic foods can only be really guaranteed by having adequate documentation trail, audit trail of the documents. So in this document, I'll leave it yourself to go and read it. They talk about the various types of food fraud, but one area that perhaps I haven't touched on and is more of a global issue is the effect that food fraud can have on emerging nations. Because when you've got countries that are trading in spices or in fruits or whatever, and they're trying, or coffee would be another good example of this, the fraudsters are actually causing difficulty for those countries to trade legitimately. So where you've got falsification of origin, the legitimate products find it difficult to compete on price, and therefore this has quite a significant effect in relation to emerging nations on poverty, and obviously on promoting good trade practices. So there we are. Have a look at the document, have a good read through it. It puts a truly international perspective on the real problem that is food fraud. And I think you'll find it, as I did, a very interesting read, and just adds to, I suppose, our understanding of this global menace that is food fraud. Okay, well there we are. That's the short food law update for today. Hopefully you'll join me on my next one. Thanks for watching.